Welcome back. Now, private universities have become an important part of Nigeria's higher education. But running a private university comes with enormous challenges. Challenges which we are going to explore this morning with Professor Emmanuel Umezinwa, who is the Vice Chancellor of Peter University, Achina. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
All right, Prof. Good morning. Thank you for joining, of course. How does lack of government funding affect the sustainability and growth of private universities in Nigeria?
Of course, this is the most obvious of all problems facing private universities. I was talking with a few people from the government parastatal yesterday, and I made it clear to them that it appears the Nigerian government forgets that students who are in private universities are Nigerian citizens and ought to be. So funding, however we look at all the problems facing our private universities, funding is at the center of all the problems. There is need for the government to understand that they need to extend this patronage which federal and state universities enjoy to private universities, because the private universities are helping the government do what is their responsibility. So,
Right. All right. So, how would you describe generally the current landscape of private university education in Nigeria, apart from this one problem that you've spoken about already? But generally, how would you describe the landscape of the private university education in Nigeria?
We'll see the approval of so many private universities in the recent years in Nigeria, and it speaks volumes. And given again the agitations that we always see coming from ASU, coming from universities, federal universities, asking for government involvement, full involvement in the running of federal and state universities, you see that the government has taken a new turn in approving private universities to help diffuse the tension. So what you see today is that the emergence of a lot of private universities is shaping the educational landscape in the country. There are so many of them, and so many of them are doing very well because it's a private enterprise. And when you compare private enterprises with federal enterprises, government enterprises, the injection of commitment and devotion which you find in the private sector is always bigger and yields better results. So there is a bright future for private universities in Nigeria, despite the fact that they cost more. They cost more for parents or for students, but the results are there for everybody to see. So it's not a monolith for Nigeria. It's everywhere the same thing. Private universities are more costly, yet they are very effective.
Okay, then, so let's look at academic staff. What exactly are the major obstacles that private universities face when in attracting and also retaining qualified academic staff?
Thanks for that question. It's a beautiful one. It's a big problem. When we have the supervising body come to the private universities to look at what they're doing, their programs, and their governance style, you'll discover that they will want you to have a professor, a reader, a senior lecturer, and your university is just 1 year old, 2 years old. You find out that you cannot have a senior lecturer who is not affiliated to another institution. So the private universities face this problem of securing good, qualified lecturers in the different cadres, in the different ranks. Now, what you do is you start planning on how to inject a lot of funds into the salaries of individuals you want to draw from the state and federal universities to come to your university. But is it sustainable? If a senior lecturer is paid 300,000 naira in a federal university, and you want to bring him to your private university, and you want to pay him 600,000 to make it attractive, can you sustain it? So it is a problem. Then again, if you want to begin to employ the new horns in the lecturing cadre in your university, they have to start from the assistant lecturer position or the lecturer 2 position. So this is a big problem. Hiring and sustaining the salaries of qualified lecturers is a big problem for us. So most of the time, the private universities engage part-time lecturers and those who come on contracts and those who have just retired but are still strong enough to teach and those who come on sabbatical leave. It's a big problem, but the private universities are finding ways to navigate these very tumultuous waters.
Right. Now, earlier on, you mentioned about private universities being expensive, but the students still get the quality education that they need. And I want to ask, how do you balance affordability with sustainability? Because parents, of course, who pay these fees argue that the tuition is too high. Most people can't even afford to go to these private universities, so they are stuck with the federal and state universities. And of course, VCs like you also say that these fees barely covers the cost, just like you mentioned, getting a qualified lecturer full time, having to pay up to like 600,000. What is the sustainability looking like? So how do you then, balance these keeping fees affordable for parents and for students who would want to attend private universities, while also ensuring that the institution remains sustainable?
Apart from the issue of high cost of private universities, and again, for some private universities who are able to get into enterprises that can yield funds, the major source of income for private universities is just the tuition, what the students pay. And that takes care of salaries, that takes care of maintenance, and that takes care of capital expenditures. And this is not easy. So it's not difficult to find out why the tuitions are usually higher than what you find in state and federal universities. But the truth of the matter is that we keep saying it. The Nigerian government needs to understand that these students in private universities are Nigerians who will eventually work for all Nigerians and work in Nigerian companies and in the business space. So it is not easy for parents to afford what the universities, some of the universities. I know some universities who come up with a lot of ideas and incentives like scholarships for students. Presently, I scout for scholarships for my students. I just got 5 last week, scholarships. And I know about Adeleke University, where most of the students are on scholarship, as a social responsibility, which comes from the proprietor. So this is how they try to navigate the problem. The income power of most of the parents whose words and children are here is not much. But what do you do? How do you pay? You need to retain your lecturers. You need to retain them. Otherwise, they will be there elsewhere for greener pastures. So it's important for everyone to understand that navigating this is not just the making of the private universities.
Okay, Prof.
Yeah.
All right, Prof. Just before we go away, what strategies can these private universities adopt in order to improve their financial sustainability without overburdening students with high fees?
Well, everybody knows that the business climate of the country is not wonderful at the moment. So investing in in things that can yield returns for the sustainability of programs in the university is even a dicey one. And some private universities are looking outwards, looking for services and products they can market outside Nigeria to attract foreign currencies. And they're looking abroad too for support, establishing foundations abroad to attract sponsorship. And so these are the things they can at the moment do. There are some who go into enterprises and businesses like production, small scale productions for table water and all of that. Apart from that, you just look at the general landscape of the industries in Nigeria. It's not easy for Nigerians, so it's affecting everyone. Beyond that, good-spirited individuals have always come to the aid of private universities with scholarships, with donations, with grants, and some state governors, including the governor of Anambra State, current and the past governor, they have supported my university in many ways. And so the state government can come to the aid of the private universities in their state, because these are citizens of Nigerian states and are going to work in Nigeria, or at least for Nigerians. They're going to find their spaces in the country. It's important for the, something like Tet Fund to look into how they can accommodate private universities too, because they have done marvelous work for most federal and state universities.
Now, while we talk about, having the ability to get and keep qualified lecturers and qualified staff, there is also this perception about private universities having students or being able to attract, a number of students to the university. And there are a lot of most families or most people still have this affinity towards public universities because they feel that it has more prestige and it has more qualified lecturers, and even issues with NUC accreditation of courses and things like that. So how do you address such situations, and how do you handle that?
Well, very wonderful question. I came to this private university, Peter University, from Nandazikwe University. I would not accept that private universities have more qualified lecturers than federal universities. That's difficult to uphold. It takes a lot. It takes a lot to build such reputation. But the point is, it is incumbent on the supervisory body of all universities in Nigeria, like NUC, to make it easier for universities to cooperate with other universities within and outside Nigeria for online lectures. There are people who are abroad who are willing to lecture in universities in Nigeria, private universities in Nigeria, for no fee at all. So it is important that in making the rules that guide the operations of universities, that they consider the possibility of universities sourcing people from abroad and elsewhere, making online teaching part of the life that we have to know now in Nigeria. Because attracting lecturers to private universities demands a lot. It demands a lot.
All right, Prof. Prof,
Okay,
thank you so much for joining us this morning. Our time is up already. Thank you so much for joining us on the Signature Morning Show.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
The pleasure is ours. Of course, the conversation was on the challenges of managing private universities in Nigeria. Our guest, Professor Emmanuel Umezinwa, who is the Vice Chancellor, Peter University, Achina, joined us this morning to talk about these challenges. Of course, this is where we draw the curtains on this particular conversation. We'll go at a short break and we'll be back with more.